Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about a woman who had it all. Fame, fortune, followers. She was the face of blockbuster movies, the queen of late-night interviews, and a permanent fixture in every trending list. The world adored her, the cameras chased her, and the industry, it worshipped her. And then she vanished. No scandal, no meltdown, no expose in a tell-all tabloid. Just a quiet, deliberate exit from a world most people spend their lives trying to enter. Why? Because she found something more meaningful than flashing lights and fickle fame. She found faith. You see, while the world applauded her for the role she played, deep inside she was searching for her real self. Not the filtered image, not the rehearsed answers. A soul behind the spotlight. And in that search she discovered Islam. Now let's pause for a moment, because I can already hear the critics foaming at the mouth. She's been brainwashed. She gave up her freedom. She's covering up. What a shame. But here's what they'll never understand. This wasn't surrender, this was liberation. She walked away from red carpets to walk toward prayer rugs. From chasing validation to seeking spiritual truth. She swapped designer gowns for modesty, not because she had to, but because she chose to. And in doing so, she exposed a deep hypocrisy in our so-called progressive culture. A woman is celebrated when she strips for the screen, but questioned when she covers for her beliefs. Think about that. In a world obsessed with image, she chose integrity. In an industry built on illusion, she pursued something real. And in doing so, she reminded us that true power doesn't come from the lens of a camera. It comes from the lens of conviction. So to the actress who gave it all up for Islam, you didn't lose fame, you gained freedom. And for that, many of us, whether we admit it or not, applaud you. She was once the shining star of the entertainment industry, adored by millions, idolized by fans, and envied by peers. Her name alone could sell out theaters. Her face graced the covers of countless magazines. Paparazzi trailed her every move, hoping for a glimpse, a quote, a headline. Critics praised her performances, calling her the future of cinema. She had the roles, the recognition, the red carpet invitations, and a social media following most could only dream of. Every inch of her life seemed drenched in success, every moment crafted for applause. She was not just an actress. She was a symbol of aspiration in a world that prizes fame above all else. And yet, beneath the glamour, there was a quiet, gnawing void. Every standing ovation echoed into silence when she returned home. Every award felt strangely hollow after the cameras stopped flashing. In public, she smiled brightly, lived loudly, and played the part with perfection. But in private, she was beginning to realize that the spotlight couldn't fill the emptiness of the soul. The very world that had crowned her queen was also the one that reduced her worth to appearance, relevance, and public perception. Fame, she discovered, was a prison wrapped in gold. Her journey wasn't marked by sudden breakdowns or dramatic outbursts. It was slower, deeper, a spiritual unease that quietly took root. She began to ask herself questions that fame could not answer. Who am I beneath the makeup, the lighting, the brand deals? What do I stand for, and what am I feeding my soul? She started to pull back from the noise, turning down roles that didn't sit right with her conscience. She became more introspective, more curious about life beyond the world of scripts and screens, and slowly a seed of truth began to grow. In her search, she found herself drawn to Islam, not the distorted version fed by tabloids and political agendas, but the real Islam, pure, spiritual, and transformative. The teachings of modesty, purpose, submission to God, and inner peace resonated with a part of her she had long ignored. The simplicity of prayer, the clarity of Tawheed, the beauty of surrender to a creator who values hearts over headlines. This was unlike anything she had ever known. For the first time, she wasn't expected to perform or pretend. She wasn't being judged by casting agents or fans. She was simply a soul standing before her Lord. Her heart turned toward faith, and with it came clarity. The fame that once seemed like the pinnacle of existence now appeared shallow, even burdensome. She began to see the industry for what it truly was, an endless cycle of image maintenance, ego stroking, and moral compromise. She no longer wanted to be defined by roles written by others. She wanted to live by a script revealed by God. The spotlight lost its allure. The applause faded. What remained was a burning desire for truth, peace, and spiritual grounding. And so, at the height of her career, when others were chasing bigger contracts and greater exposure, she chose to step away, not because she had failed, but because she had awakened. She didn't run from fame in fear. She walked away from it in strength. She recognized that true honor does not lie in being known by millions, but in being known by the one. The same cameras that once followed her every move now sought explanations, but none could truly grasp the depth of her transformation. She had found something that no director could script, no spotlight could highlight, and no fan base could replicate. She disappeared just like that. No dramatic press conference, no farewell tour, no emotional farewell post carefully crafted for sympathy, just silence. For the fans, it was baffling. For the media, it was scandalous. One day, she was everywhere, on billboards, in gossip columns, trending across platforms, and the next, she was gone. Interviews declined, scripts rejected, endorsements unanswered, and not just a break, not just a hiatus. This was different. It wasn't intentional, it was complete. The entertainment industry has a peculiar relationship with disappearances. Usually it's a story of tragedy, burnout, breakdown, or scandal. That's what they assumed here too. Whispers began, she must be going through something, maybe it's a mental health crisis, has she been cancelled? But no one could find the dirt. There was no controversy, no hidden scandal waiting to erupt, just a clean, quiet withdrawal from a life she once embraced. And that silence, that refusal to explain herself on their terms, made them uneasy. It wasn't just that she walked away, it's how she did it. She didn't try to hold on to bits and pieces of that life. She didn't linger on red carpets or make nostalgic appearances to keep her name alive. She let it all go. Fame, fortune, fans, everything the world taught her to value. For an industry built on image and relevance, this was unthinkable. She had every reason to stay. Her career wasn't in decline. Her audience hadn't turned on her. In fact, she was at her peak, and that's what made it such a powerful message. Her absence made people uncomfortable because it challenged their definition of success. The media thrives on stories of people trying to be famous, clawing their way to relevance, but someone turning their back on it all, not out of failure, but out of conviction. That's not a story they know how to tell. It doesn't sell the same way. It raises questions that cut too close to the bone. What does it say about the nature of fame when someone willingly gives it up for faith? What does it reveal about the emptiness of it all when someone finds more meaning in prayer than in applause? And so the speculation continued. They demanded an explanation. They tried to fill the silence with their own narratives. Some accused her of being manipulated. Others suggested she must be hiding something, because the truth that a woman could walk away from worldly success in pursuit of spiritual truth was simply too difficult for many to accept. But for those who understand the power of faith, her disappearance wasn't confusing. It was courageous. She wasn't lost. She was found. She wasn't hiding. She was protecting. In stepping away, she reclaimed ownership of her soul. She was no longer a commodity, no longer a product to be consumed by public demand. She chose stillness over spectacle, solitude over noise, and submission to God over submission to fame. Silence was not weakness, it was strength. It was a declaration that she no longer needed validation from the world. She had found something greater, deeper, eternal. And while the media couldn't comprehend it and the fans couldn't accept it, those who value the life of the heart, those who know the weight of this world compared to the hereafter, saw it clearly. This wasn't a disappearance, it was a departure from illusion to truth, from the fleeting to the everlasting, from being seen by millions to being seen by the one. There was a moment, a turning point, when everything changed, not with loud fanfare or dramatic spectacle, but deep within her heart, where real revolutions begin. It may have been a single encounter, a quiet reflection, a question she couldn't shake off, or perhaps a series of moments that gradually peeled away the layers of illusion. But at some point she began to see her life with unfiltered eyes. The flashing lights, the adoration, the attention, it all started to look different. Not beautiful, not thrilling, but artificial, temporary, deceptive. She realized that the image the world worshipped was not her true self, that the glamour she wore like a second skin was in truth a veil, one that separated her from her fitra, her natural disposition. She had spent years performing roles written by others, trying to embody fantasies scripted for the screen. But who was writing her story? Who was she when the cameras stopped rolling? Who was she in the silence, in the solitude, in the late hours of the night when the makeup was gone and the applause had faded? These questions haunted her, not as a crisis, but as an awakening. And it was in this awakening that she began to seek something lasting, something real. She explored, she read, she listened. And with every step closer to truth, the glitter of her past life dimmed. She began to understand that the very system that had celebrated her was also one that demanded she conform to ideals that eroded her dignity. She was not asked to express her mind, but to sell an image. She was not encouraged to find peace, but to chase relevance. Her value was measured in likes, box office numbers, and headlines, not in the quality of her soul. Then came Islam, not in the form of propaganda or pressure, but as light, as calm, as clarity. She encountered the words of the Quran, and they struck her not as foreign, but as familiar, like a long-lost truth returning to its rightful place. She learned of Tawheed, the oneness of God, and suddenly the weight of pleasing everyone else lifted. She read about modesty not as oppression, but as protection, empowerment, honor. She saw in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, a model of character, compassion, and unwavering purpose. And she began to understand that submission to Allah was not a limitation, it was liberation from everything else that claimed ownership of her. This moment of transformation was not public. It wasn't announced with cameras and flashing headlines. It happened quietly, powerfully in her heart. But it changed everything. She began to pray, not as performance, but as communion. She began to cover, not in shame, but in strength. She began to live, not for the gaze of the world, but for the pleasure of her Creator. The turning point was not an end to her story, but the true beginning. The past roles, the industry expectations, the labels, they no longer defined her. She was no longer a celebrity searching for identity and applause. She was a servant of Allah, rediscovering her worth through faith. And in that moment, when others might have clung tighter to the world, she let go, not in despair, but in hope. Not in fear, but in certainty. She knew now that what she had been searching for in fame was always meant to be found in faith. This was the turning point the world could not see, but it was the point at which her life truly began. Embracing Islam was not a trend, a phase, or a reaction. It was a conscious, deliberate return to truth. For her, it wasn't about adopting a new identity, but uncovering the one that had always been waiting beneath the surface. Islam did not erase her, it revealed her. She began to see her life through a new lens, a lens that centered not on self-worship, but on submission to the one who created her. And in that submission, she found a strength, a peace, and a clarity she had never known before. The world she came from had given her everything: fame, wealth, beauty, recognition, but it had never given her peace. It demanded she constantly reinvent herself, stay relevant, stay perfect. The moment she slipped from their idea of perfection, she was no longer useful. But Islam didn't demand perfection. It asked for sincerity, for effort, for humility before the most merciful. It was not a stage performance. It was a return to purpose. She discovered in the teachings of the Quran the blueprint for a life of meaning, a life built not on ego, but on obedience, not on illusion, but on truth. She began to pray, and those prayers became her anchor. In sujud, with her forehead on the ground, she tasted a kind of peace that the spotlight had never offered. There was no audience here, no judgment, no flashing cameras, only a soul speaking to its Lord. She read the Quran, not as a distant text, but as divine communication, as personal guidance. Every verse about patience, humility, justice, and gratitude resonated like truth she had always known deep down, but had never heard articulated with such clarity. She adopted hijab, not because she was forced, but because she understood. She saw it not as restriction, but as honor. In an industry that had commodified her body, Islam gave her the right to reclaim it. She no longer existed to be looked at, consumed, or desired. She existed to be respected, valued, and protected. Every layer of modesty was a rebellion against a culture that measured her by her appearance. Now, she was choosing to be known not for her image, but for her character. Not for her beauty, but for her submission to Allah. Of course, it wasn't easy. The stares, the gossip, the headlines trying to reframe her journey as a tragedy. They called it a fall from grace. But she knew the truth. It was a rise into purpose. The media couldn't understand how someone could leave what they define as everything, but she had seen through it. She had lived it. She had felt the emptiness of applause and the exhaustion of pretending. And when she found Islam, she found a place where she didn't need to pretend anymore. She began to learn, to grow, to change. Her priorities shifted. Her days no longer revolved around appearances or press tours, but around prayer times. Her heart, once restless and scattered, was now steady. Her eyes, once trained to look outward for approval, were now turned inward, seeking the pleasure of her Lord. Islam gave her not just a new path, it gave her a new home. A home within herself, a home in her faith, a home in the Ummah. And though she walked away from fame, she walked into something far more lasting. She was no longer living for this world's approval, but for the eternal approval of her Creator. The sacrifice in the eyes of the world looked great, but to her, it was no sacrifice at all, because what she received in return, clarity, dignity, serenity, was priceless. The moment her conversion became public, the storm began. It was as if her faith had triggered a cultural alarm. Headlines buzzed with speculation, interviews turned into interrogations, and social media boiled with outrage and confusion. The same media that once praised her beauty and talent now questioned her sanity. The same fans who once adored her performances now accused her of betrayal. How could someone so beloved, so successful, so modern choose Islam? Accusations came swiftly. She's been brainwashed. She's lost. She's joined something oppressive. Commentators, influencers, and pundits, many who had never opened a Qur'an or spoken to a practicing Muslim, suddenly became self-proclaimed experts on Islam. They dissected her clothing, her silence, her hijab, her prayer schedule, looking for evidence of coercion. Few could accept that a woman with such worldly power could willingly submit to a higher one. The narrative of the free-spirited celebrity didn't fit with the image of the devout Muslim woman. So instead of questioning their assumptions, they questioned her. They couldn't imagine that her hijab was an act of empowerment. They couldn't believe that stepping away from the camera might be an act of self-respect. To them, faith, especially this faith, was a cage, but she knew otherwise. What they mistook for oppression, she recognized as liberation. She had walked through the fire of fame, tasted the poison of vanity, and emerged seeking truth. And now, having found it, she would not apologize. Still, the backlash was real. Casting calls stopped, sponsorships vanished. Some old friends grew distant, unsure of how to relate to her now. Journalists asked loaded questions, trying to catch her between defending her beliefs and preserving her image. They wanted controversy, not conviction. They wanted a fall, not a rise. But what they saw as decline, she experienced as ascent. Toward Allah, toward meaning, toward peace. What pained her most wasn't the criticism. It was the ignorance. The way people spoke of Islam as if it were incompatible with intelligence, with freedom, with choice. As though belief in God somehow dulled a person's light rather than igniting it. As though covering her body meant covering her mind. She had found a faith rooted in mercy, in knowledge, in devotion, and they dismissed it with caricatures and cliches. But she didn't fight them with anger. She responded with grace, with composure, with the quiet power of a woman who knows where she stands. She answered questions when they were sincere and ignored those rooted in mockery. She didn't need to prove herself to the world anymore. Her dignity came not from headlines, but from her relationship with her Lord. The storm could rage around her. She had already found shelter in her faith. And in the chaos, something beautiful began to happen. Others began to see her not just as a former actress or a convert, but as a woman of strength and purpose. Muslims around the world reached out with support and prayers. Sisters who had hidden their faith in fear felt inspired to embrace it more openly. Even some non-Muslims, curious and disarmed by her sincerity, began to question what they thought they knew about Islam. Her choice had opened a conversation, not one of pity, but of possibility. So yes, the backlash came, but so did the clarity. Her Islam was not defined by the noise outside, it was defined by the calm inside. And as the world debated her choices, she stood firm in the truth she had found, no longer chasing their approval, no longer afraid of their judgment. She had traded fleeting fame for eternal meaning, and not even the loudest voices could drown out the peace of that decision. What the world saw as a loss, she knew was a gift. She had stepped away from the artificial glow of celebrity life into the quiet, steady light of faith. And though the transition had been steep, she had no regrets, only gratitude. What once consumed her days, photo shoots, press junkets, industry, politics, was now replaced by a life that felt whole, real, and profoundly alive. She didn't just change her schedule, she changed her soul's compass. Every decision was now rooted in seeking the pleasure of her Creator. Her days became filled with meaning that had nothing to do with performance. She woke with purpose, not to be seen but to pray. Her calendar revolved around Salah, not premieres. Her conversations deepened, her friendships matured, and her sense of self became unshakable. There was no longer a need to keep up appearances or play a part. She was not on brand, she was on deen. Islam didn't strip her of identity, it restored it. It didn't silence her voice, it gave it direction. She became a quiet example of transformation, not loud, not boastful, but unmistakably inspiring. For many, her decision planted seeds. Young Muslim girls who had once been torn between faith and fitting in now looked at her and saw someone who chose both strength and submission. Converts found in her story a mirror of their own struggles, the family confusion, the media judgment, the internal battles, and took comfort in knowing they weren't alone. Even some born into Islam but distanced from it were stirred by her return to the faith, proof that it's never too late to come home. What made her journey so compelling wasn't that she preached, but that she lived it. She wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore, not producers, not critics, not even the Muslim community. She was simply striving for sincerity, for taqwa, for closeness to Allah, and in doing so, she brought light into a world that desperately needed it. Her social media, once filled with curated snapshots of red carpets and exotic vacations, became a space of reflection. Verses from the Quran, reminders of gratitude, moments of stillness. She didn't lecture or shame, but she reminded people gently, powerfully, that there's another way to live, a better way, a way that frees you from the exhaustion of constantly needing to prove your worth, a way that invites you to surrender, not to people, not to trends, but to the one who created you. She had tasted the peak of this world and walked away from it with full knowledge of what she was leaving behind. That's what made her story so rare and so powerful. She didn't leave because she couldn't make it. She left because she did make it and found it lacking. She had seen the best the world had to offer and realized that the true prize wasn't fame or followers or fortune. It was faith. Now her heart is steady. Her life is simple but full. She still smiles, still laughs, still has dreams, but they are different now. They are not built on applause, but on akira, not on temporary platforms, but on eternal purpose. What she has now cannot be taken away by gossip, cancelled contracts, or changing trends, because what she has now, iman, guidance, peace, is not from the world, it's from Allah. And in the end, she didn't lose anything at all, she gained everything.